are looking at Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 1 to 38. It might be good for us to have a paper and pen ready and also a Bible that you can refer to nearby. So, let's see. So, my part for this series is looking at Nehemiah chapter 8, 9, 10. Last week we did 8, this week we do 9, next week we do 10. And we have divided it, and you see that today we're looking at the 24th day of the 7th month of this passage. So this is the verses, and we have a look. It says here that in the beginning part, that now on the 24th day of this month, the people of Israel were assembled with fasting and in sackcloth and with earth on their heads. So they are coming together, and this is a solemn moment. Okay, so the people of Israel. So you have a gathering of the people. Last week I said that how important it is for the people to gather. All right. And then we have the Israelites separated themselves from all foreigners. So you have the people of Israel and those who are Gentiles. And some of those foreigners may even be their own wives. So that one is coming from Ezra. So they separated themselves and confessed their sins and iniquities of their fathers. So it's a communal confession. It's not an individual confession. It's a communal confession. And they stood at their place and they read from the book. Okay, so in that time, that would be the Bible for a quarter of the day. So 6 hours. 6 hours of reading, and I'm sure there was also explaining from the Bible. And another quarter of it, they make confession and worship. So another 6 hours of confession and worship. So you're looking at around a 12-hour service. So this is on the 24th day of the month. They have a 12-hour service. And you have the Levites. So you can think of them as the church leaders or the worship leaders if you want. And they cried out with a loud voice to the Lord their God. So there's worship. And then you also have the Levites. Again, they come together, those names. And again, every time you see a name in the Bible, right, you try to maybe situate it with people that you know. So that, for example, if you think about Levites, you could say group leaders or the worship team and so on, so that you have a better sense, because that's how the Israelites look at them at that time. So once you replace those names with people that you know, okay, then you have a sense, you're able to put yourself where they are, put yourself in their shoes. So the worship team said, "Stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise." And so this first paragraph talks about how they are coming together, and then it goes and launches into the next part, which is a quite long one. Okay, so the rest of this part, right, is all one chunk. Okay, so it's all one chunk, and in that chunk, we will answer the question which we looked at last week. Last week, we saw that the people cry, and you ask why they cry. I say, read Nehemiah 9. And why they rejoice? I say, read Nehemiah 9. Why? Because Nehemiah 9 is a good place for you to see why did the Israelites cry, they weep, and why did they rejoice. Okay, so what I suggest you do, is that you take a piece of paper and you just draw something like this. So the bottom part is the verses. Okay, so it's the verses, verse 6, verse 8, verse 10, verse 12, and so on. And then you have the upper part is a happy, and the bottom part is a sad. Okay, so if you have a paper and pen, that'd be good. If not, because I want you, it's a good exercise to have, and then I'll give you 5 minutes later on to do it. So listen to the instruction first. So you have to mark X, whether the verse is a happy verse or a sad verse. So I'll give you one example. So when you have this verse 6, you are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that's in them, and you preserve all of them. And the host of heaven worships you. So if you're an Israelite, okay, you're there, and then you listen or you read this. What is your heartbeat? I mean, are you happy or are you sad to hear this? Okay, so it's not so much as whether you are happy at the moment. I'm asking you to imagine yourself as an Israelite. So when the Israelite hears this, it is obviously in a worshipful mood. All right, so you can think of it as hands raised up and it's glorious and worship. Okay, so that's how you would read that verse. And then you would just mark an X over there. So verse 6 is a happy verse. Okay, so that's basically what you do from verse 6 all the way, if you can, to verse 38. and then you will have a nice graph at the end. So I give you a 5 minutes time just to do as many verses as you can. If you cannot complete, don't worry. This is an exercise. And you will see that this passage has both happy and sad verses. And if you don't have a piece of paper or not, you can just read the Bible passage and then just think, is it happy or sad? Happy or sad? Okay, but then paper and pen will be helpful. So any questions? So I'm going to leave you for 5 minutes. This exercise allows you to read the passage as well, because later on I'll be going through it quite assuming you've read it. So if there are no questions, you can start. Your exam starts now. I kind of wish saying that. Now I don't get a chance to anymore. All right? So if no questions, wait, let me see. Right, 5 minutes. Okay, so let's carry on. Like I say, if you haven't got far, never mind. The point is that you also read the Bible passage. So this is what I got. And in here, you can really see that there is good times and bad times sort of thing happening. And you can see that a lot of things are actually praise. So from the very beginning, it's talking about what God has done, and there's a lot of praise coming in. And this exercise is very good when you're trying to summarize big chunks of things. So I did this last time with the 13 students, where we look at Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 28. And then you just see the whole drama, and based on how exciting or how, so you can actually not just be happy, you can also have a happy, very, 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 very happy. And then you can just plot it along the graph to see the story of the Bible coming out. Because I think the Bible actually intends for us to read it with an emotional response, just like you watch a movie or read a book or anything like that. So you would have an emotional response. So so that is that, and there's a lot of things you can learn from this one already. But let's just move forward, okay? Because another thing, I wouldn't go through 5 minutes. I'll just tell you the answer. So another thing is that you can divide the verses into the biblical eras. Okay, so as you read through it, you notice that, I hope, that it starts from creation, which is a very long time ago, and then it goes steadily through time. So you can actually cut across the verses and say that, okay, from which verse to which verse is Genesis, which verse is talking about the Exodus before entry into the promised land, which part is the promised land, which part is the kingdom and the exile. So you can kind of break it apart. And then you just do it like that. So you can actually try. And it may not be fully accurate, because then you might be confused, like I was. I mean, verse 22 onwards, is there a kingdom there? But the king is only mentioned on verse 31 onwards. So what we're doing here is that we're trying to study the Bible. And it's useful when you have a summary text like this one, right? To think of ways to break it up, to organize it, so that you can have a sense of what is this passage about. So these are just technique. One is just looking at the emotional element of the story, and the other one is talking about the time, especially this type where you have a grand summary. And we learned that this passage is definitely going from the beginning to today. Okay, that's how it's going. And there is the emotional part. And I just want to highlight over here that why the big story is important. Now, if you say that you're a Miri boy or Miri girl, then of course you must know things like where it's been done, or where is Maybank, which Maybank, or where is Gatin. So those are landmarks in Miri that any Miri person should know. Okay, if I say Pelita, or if I say Lutong, and it's like Pujut, you guys all register already. Okay, these are things that I know. So if you say that you're from Miri and you don't know Lutong, Pujut, Pelita, I mean, where exactly of which part of Miri are you actually from? Definitely not Miri City. So it's the same for us in the Bible as well. If you say you're a Christian, right, there are big parts of the Bible that you are expected to know. Jesus, sin, redemption, salvation. I mean, there are big concepts that you should know. But just like in a city, right, there are smaller roads, there are parts like secret alleys, that sort of thing, of good things and bad things, however you want to say it. So the Bible also has a lot of secret alleys. So some parts which are not often visited. And if you really want to be a person, a Miri boy through and through, or Miri girl through and through, in this 20, 30, 40 years of your life in Miri, you have gone through the hospital, you've gone through the clinics, to the schools, to your friend's house, up and down, left and right, throughout Miri in your lifetime over here. So it's same as well for the Bible. If you call yourself a Christian, I put this quite hard to you, then you should, in your 10, 20, 40, 60 years of your life, because of your dependence on the Bible for healing, for learning, for comfort, for joy, marriage, funeral, sickness, everything, right? So you should be able to know the Bible up, down, left, right as well. Okay? So that's why I say that there's a value of reading the Bible in 1 year. Just now what we had was a taste of a summary of the whole Old Testament up till the exile. And for us, we are talking about also including the New Testament. It's important to read the Bible in 1 year so that you have wide width and depth. There's a danger that some people say, no, 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 you must read it and understand every single word. Okay, and that one's also important. But then both are important. Okay, so that's the thing I want to say here. So if you are on the Bible, reading the Bible in 1 year program, please. And as I say this, I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this. I also struggle and I almost don't complete. But then it is something that we should be striving towards, okay? Reading the Bible through regularly, daily, okay? And as you do this, right, you will be familiar with the main timeline. So for example, like the one I showed you just now, you have Genesis, you have the patriarchs, you have the promised land, you have all the stories, you have a fairly good idea of how the time actually goes through. You may not know specific details, which king, or which prophet, but you should have a kind of an idea. And as you grow older, as you grow more mature in the Christian faith, it should be fleshed out more and more. And you should be familiar with all this big word, theological categories. But actually it just means that you should be understanding of who God is. God's goodness, His love, his compassion, His kindness, His mercy, His faithfulness, and also God's greatness, His omnipotence, okay, His all power, His all knowing, His all presence, His everywhere, His eternal, okay, and that's just about God. You also have man, so there are many parts of man, talking about sin, Jesus, Holy Spirit, spiritual gifts, what is the church, who is the pastor, who are the leaders, who are the elders. So all these theological categories, right, which is based on the Bible. So you should, as you go over time, be familiar. And I also want to just say one benefit, okay, just one quick one. There are many benefits, but I just say one quick one. You will have a richer spiritual vocabulary. Some of us, I noticed this in the youth, I also noticed in myself and also even in the leaders. There are certain words that we use more often, or some concepts that we use more often. Some of my youth, for example, they always talk about storm, and they always talk about Father in heaven. And it's obvious that those are the concepts that is very near to them. They are very affected by it, very touched by it, very convicted by it. That's how they pray, that's how they worship, that's how they look at God. But at the same time, that is not the only way that we understand the Christian journey. Okay, the prodigal son is a very common theme for many Christians. But there's also other parts of God. The same way that as I look at Brother Kwek, he is last time working in Shell. He is a husband. He is a father. He is a grandfather. He is a brother. He is also a Chinese minister. So there are many aspects to Brother Kwek, and it's true for all of us. So we don't. If we strive to know God in one way, we should look towards God in all the different ways. Look at man in all the different ways that the Bible describes man. Man as creature, man as person who has dominion. So you have a richer spiritual vocabulary. You don't just talk about God Father, you talk about God King, you talk about God Creator, you talk about God Eternal. So all these things come off, and then you have a stronger sense of who God is in His wholeness. So you're not just stuck thinking that God is just the person that empowers spiritual gifts, for example. Okay, so that's the value of reading the Bible in 1 year. So let's talk about God. So you see that in this passage, right, it is always talking about God. You are the Lord, you alone. So it just focuses, you are the one who do this, you're the one who do that, you are merciful, you are gracious, you are forgiving, you are doing. So it just keeps repeating. And if we highlight in yellow, if we take a highlighter, and we just highlight the word you and your, almost every sentence is talking about you, which is God. So this is a very focused on God passage. It's not like some parts of the Bible where it talks about a theology or talks about a story of Joseph or whatever. It is very much a passage, and you can, another exercise you can do, but we're not going to do it, but I encourage you to do it, is you just list down from here, right? Who is God from here? God is the one who made heaven, who preserved all of the creation, who is worshipped, who chose Abraham, who, and then just list down all these things. And you have a sense that this is actually a summary of the Old Testament. Okay, and there are many beautiful things inside here, but I'm just getting a gist, okay, just getting a summary. This is about you, oh God. So even as you speak about this, we're talking about, this is talking about you, God Almighty, all right? And the other part is how Israel responded to God. Okay, so that's the part. So God, you do this, and how Israel has responded. And a lot of times the response is very negative. So you see that this is the sad part. This is the part where people cry. Because God, you're so good, you're so good, you're so good, you're so good to me. And this is how my fathers, and this is how we treat you. Okay, they refuse to obey. They're not mindful of the wonders, stiffen the neck, and they were disobedient, they rebelled, they cast your law. So this is the beautiful things, the law that God has given, and then we throw it out, we kill the prophets, and so on. So this is how Israel has responded to God. So one part happy, one part very, very sad. Because how can you do this to a person who has done so much? Even man to man, right? If someone has done something so wonderful, so generous, and so on, and the person who is the recipient of those good things treated, okay, curse the one who, the benefactor. We also get sad or angry at how ungrateful the person is. Okay. And some at this state, especially my youngsters, they will say that this is boring, this is sejarah, and I hate history. And at this, I want to just correct. This is actually not just narration. This is not talking about dates and about incidences, a list of things that has happened to Israel. Because you see, this one is actually a prayer. And this is a very important part. If you miss out on this one, you just it's just a bunch of things that has happened in the past. No, this is not just a summary. This is a prayer. This is people talking to God. Okay, this is people talking to God. We are looking into the prayer of our spiritual ancestors, to how they talk to God. And you are the Lord, you alone. And we can learn from them, because we are learning to pray. If you identify this as a prayer, there are many things, other things that have no time again, sorry, brothers and sisters. But if you identify this as a prayer, there are new things you can learn from this one. So it's not just a list of events. And you see that what are they? They praise God, they explain, not explain, they repeat, they remember, they recall what God has done. And how can they do this? Remember, they have spent, I think, from the first day of the 7th month, they read, Ezra opened the Bible, and then they read. And then they've been reading the Bible day after day after day. Okay, it's been in earlier passages. And then they have a 6-hour Bible reading as well. So it's in their head, you see. So it's all this is in their head, and then they're responding in prayer. Okay, when you read the Bible and then it touches you, you respond to in prayer. It reflects back, you see. And then you say that, and as they pray, there is this request, which is that they are in hardship. And again, let us remember where Israel is at the moment. Remember what Dr. Peter Tam said. Remember what Pastor Lim said. This is Israel, not in the top of its history. This is Israel in the very, very bottom valley. All right, the city is gone, temple is gone, the walls were just rebuilt, but the walls, as miraculous as its was, it's not its former glory. And the people around them oppose them, and you have opposition within the ranks as well. This was all covered by Pastor Lim before. So Israel right now is in a very pitiful state. And they are praying to the God who has done all these wonderful things before. The God who made heaven and heaven of heavens, the earth and all that's in it. Such a mighty God, you know. But its people are beggars. God's people are beggars here. But they still look to God. Okay, so that is I think over here. In the last part of what it say actually is, we are in great distress. So it's a prayer asking God for help. And one day we may find ourselves in this, and maybe we are today actually, that we are in great distress. And we come to God, responding to his word, and say, you alone are God. you have done all these things. And now hear our prayer. Okay. And then we say that God, why should God hear? Why should God hear? And now let's say that some guy learning from Nehemiah chapter 9, what we just read just now, a guy decides to narrate the history of their relationship, two guys, to request something from another. So this guy says, please, your father did this for me, so therefore you should do this for me as well. And the person can actually say, I mean, imagine some guy comes to you and says that your father did this for me, so you should do something for me too. Well, the person will reply, number one, I am not my father, so I don't have to do anything for you. Number two, you are not your father, so there's nothing that I should be doing for you. Isn't it? I mean, that's the reasoning doesn't work. You understand not? If I do something for you, it's because, I want to do something for you. The reasoning doesn't work. The logic of the argument doesn't work. Just because my father did something for your father, why should I do something for you? But that is actually the argument that Israel is doing. So when Israel comes to God, what are they saying? They're saying that, please, you did this for our fathers. Obviously, there is nobody before God. And this is the part that I think Christians also neglect. We take too easily the concept that God is eternal. We don't realize the full extent that God is the same from the very beginning until now. I think we just say it too easily and we don't realize how miraculous that is, that there is a God who never changes. And this God is, how does he respond to this type of request? God, you did this for our fathers. Does God then say that, yeah, but you're not your father? No. God says that this is all my people. Exodus 6:7 is the very beginning when Mount Sinai, the covenant. And before that, you had the Abrahamic covenant. And God is saying that you are my people and I'm your God. And God, and remember where is Exodus in the timeline? We're not talking about one generation, two generation, three generation, four generation ago. Talking about hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, But God just says that I am your God and you are my people. And Israel here is praying based on that eternal God. Okay. And so this is the way they argue. Okay, they make the prayer, please, you did this for our fathers, therefore do this for us too. All right. So Israel today, the broken, begging Israel, no longer King David, King Solomon, Israel. They are at the very, very bottom. They're saying to God, you did this for all our ancestors before, the great things, Exodus, and all that sort of thing before. Now do help us, okay, for us too. So that's the logic of the argument. And you can see it in the passage, okay? It's not just me saying it. Just if we highlight in blue the words them and there, so talking about this, you did this for them, you did this for them, you did this for them. And if you highlight in green about us and our, okay? Just look at the pronouns, okay? See, something you can learn as well. When you look at the pronouns, you also learn something from the passage. You notice that the whole first part, this is the prayer, the beginning of the prayer, everything is them. You did this for them, you did this for our fathers, you did this for them, there, them, there. So everything is third person plural, okay? Everything is about them. And then it switches over to us here. Now, therefore, our God. This is the first use of the first person plural. So he's now going into, this is what you did for them. Now, God, hear our prayer. And you see this. So it talks about us, our kings, our prince. This has come to us. So it's a movement, you see. And this is something we can learn, where we tell God what God has done for in the Bible for others. And then we say, God, you are the same. So the God who was there with Nehemiah and Ezra is the same God who is with us now, right here, right now. And it's the same God that will take care of your children and your children's children. And that is just something to worship, something to really respond with worship. So that is how the Israel, that time, like when I say today, I'm talking about that time in Nehemiah, that's how they pray to God. Now, let's say that learning from Nehemiah chapter 9, Piasau Baptist Church now narrates the history of Israel's relationship to request something from God, to pray to God. Okay, so now we are like that. So PBC today, Piasau Baptist Church today, we're going to pray meeting afterward. Now we're going to say to God that, God, you did this for Israel then, therefore do this for us too. Okay? Yeah, you understand? So God, you did this to Ezra, you did this to Nehemiah, you did this for Joseph, you did this for Jacob, and that's the way we preach, right? We read the Bible. God, I claim the promises, and then we say that it's for me too. But Israel says to you, who are you? On the 24th day of this month, the people of Israel were assembled in fasting and in sackcloth and with earth on their heads. Now read this. And the Israelites separated themselves from all foreigners. Who are you? Are you a foreigner or are you an Israelite? You are a foreigner. Okay? You are a Gentile. The things that happened to Israel, you have no part of. Now you can talk to me about Rahab, you can talk to me about all the various people that has come in. Okay, that's one thing. But as a whole, right, we are Gentiles. We have no share in the promises of David, the promises to Abraham. We have no inheritance. You understand or not? Because we are, for most of us, we are Chinese. Our heritage is in China. Our emperor, all this history, culture, everything is on that side of the world. What share do we have in the Middle East, in Palestine, in Jerusalem? We have no share. But if we have no share in Jerusalem, if we have no share in Israel, we have no share in God. So if Israel was to say that you are not Israel, so how can you ask God, based on the promises that God made to Abraham, made to Israel, how can you, Piasau Baptist Church, pray to God? You cannot. So how do you respond? Well, we respond by this. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let us praise the Lord. So that is responding with a song, but that song is actually based on Bible truth. And this is something that they struggled with when in the first century church. What is the relationship of the church and Israel? What is the relationship between Christians and Jews? Do Christians have to be Jews? Do Christians have to be circumcised in order to be part of Israel? Because we want to be part of Israel in the sense that we want to inherit. And that's why Paul, you can see his arguments, Romans 9 to 11. He says that we are grafted in. We are not the main branch. We have been adopted. We have been grafted into the tree. And in Galatians, he also makes a very strong argument there. Okay, so how is it possible that this race, this group of people who are not part of Abraham, can join? And the reason is because we have faith in Jesus. It is through Jesus that we can be grafted in, because we share the faith of Abraham. For it is by faith that Abraham was counted as righteous. So in the same way, it is by faith in Christ we are also counted as righteous. And that's basically Romans. And because of this, we can join, okay? We can now join into Israel. And Israel welcomes us as the inheritors of God's promises. So when we talk about the many stars, and you have many children like stars in the sky and sand, the seashore, the promises to Abraham, it is fulfilled in us. And this is a wonderful, wonderful thing that I really think just makes us just explode in wonder. Because you see, brother and sister, it is not your good works that bring you to God. You cannot become an Israelite because you don't have that blood. You cannot go through by good works. You cannot go through it by even by your decision. Because even today, if you decide to become a Jew, you cannot. Israel, the country, the nation of Israel today will not accept you into the country as a citizen of Israel because you are not a Jew. So there is no way you can enter, okay, by blood or whatever it is, okay? But the only way you can become a true children of Abraham, okay? A true child of Abraham is through Christ. What Christ has done on the cross has joined two peoples together. And that's really something. And this is true for all Christians around the world. And that's why we say that Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let us praise the Lord. So how do we respond to the grace of God? That now the promises of God, all the Old Testament promises and the New Testament covenant, all these things are now true for us. Okay? And we can read the Bible and say that we have more in common. Here it is, brothers and sisters. We have more in common with the Jews, the children of Abraham, than we do with our ancestral roots. That is why there's a split. I'll tell you, from family to family, husband and wives, parents and children, and so on. There's the tearing. Because our allegiance and our loyalty and our love is now towards God. Doesn't mean that we don't love our spouses, our children, our parents who are not believers, but it does mean that we are now very much more in common, spiritually speaking, with those who have been called children of God. Our love is the same. Our hate for sin is the same. Our worship of one God, one Lord, one baptism, one hope, one Spirit, one God over all. All these things is one. And that's something that holds us stronger than whatever we have with unbelievers. All right? So how do we respond to the grace of God? We will continue this in Nehemiah chapter 10, where you see after this, the Israel in Nehemiah's time, they responded with a covenant, the sealing of the covenant. Next week, we'll look into how does the sealing of covenant mean for us today as Christians. So to summarize, today we learn a few Bible study techniques that can be helpful. So I encourage you to try it with different, in your own time. One is you try to trace the emotional drama, okay, the heartbeat, I call it. Is it exciting? Is it scary? Is it happy? Is it sad? And just try to trace through, and Book of Acts is one example that can be quite good. And then you can also divide by time or by book. Reason why we do this is so that we can get a grip of the overall sense, and then we can follow the story in a fulsome way. Okay, not just cognitively, so just tracing through using our brain, but we can join in the story as it is going along. And it's also important, I hope you see, that is to identify the genre. If you know that it's poetry, you respond it properly. If you know it's prayer, there are things you learn from prayer that you may not learn from poetry or from teaching. Like for example, Romans. So from prayer, you learn something. And I ask that another good exercise is to read the prayers of Nehemiah. We are looking at the story of Nehemiah, so look through it, and then you can learn something from there. The prayers of Daniel, or the prayers of any person, and you can learn something from there as well. So maybe that's something that you may want to look at one day, maybe today. Another thing I suggest is that you try to follow the pronouns, because you can also gain something from following the pronouns. As you trace through, for example, you see that the passage is predominantly, overwhelmingly talking about you, oh God. So it's not talking about me. A lot of times when you pray, just think about your prayer. When you pray, right, do you pray a lot like, God, can you give me, me, I'm in pain, help me, me, mine, our. So you see that your prayers, right, is a lot of time first person singular or first person plural. Not saying that's bad, not saying that's wrong, okay? Obviously, in different times and different seasons of our life, there is look at me, O God, for I am brokenhearted. So there's a lot of me as well. But in this one, it's a form of prayer which is predominantly you. God, this is who you are. You are, you are, you are. And that is praise. Okay? And that's how even reading the Bible can make you have a worshipful heart. So, lessons learned. Well, today we answered the question, why did they rejoice and weep? I hope you're satisfied with this. And it's true as well for whatever, again, remember, they went through the Bible, I think, many times or in depth over the many, many days they were together assembled and the many hours that they have. So they rejoice and they weep. And in chapter 9, they summarize what they have heard so far. And that's why I want to put forward to you that encourage you, read the Bible in 1 year. I have, if this is an encouragement, I have managed to succeed. I wish I succeeded more often, but there is value in doing this, because once you read the Bible completely, especially do it a few rounds, you may not think you gain much, but then when you hear some people saying something, you hear and then you say, no, that's not true. Bintang is not in Lutong. What are you talking about? Curtain is not in Pelita. What are you talking about? So even though you think that I'm just walking around and so on, you don't feel that you're learning anything. But you will sense when things are a bit off. Okay, so there's value. There's really strong value in it. I can go on, but I'll stop there. And the most important lesson I would say from the Nehemiah 9 is praying to God, okay, based on who He is. So the more you know who God is, and this is very key to our Christian life, as we know who God is, we know what He delights in, we know what He hates. Okay, and never mind. So as we know what He's angry about what is sin, what is not, what is He able to forgive, and so on, then we have a better sense of who God is, and then we can pray better to Him, and in fact we can live our life better in response. And doing so, we in this passage we also pray to God based on who we are. Remember what the Israelites did? God, you did this to them. So because you did it to them, you do it for us, because your covenant, your faithfulness applies to them and to us. In the same way, a lot of us subconsciously, we are also doing the same thing. We don't realize it, but we're also saying to God, God, because you did this for David, you did this to Jacob, you did this to Abraham, you did this to Peter, you did this to Paul. So likewise, God, do this to me, to us. And how can we make that prayer? Because Christ has brought us together, and God is eternal. Okay, so that is some lessons learned, some reflections. So first reflection question, does reading the Bible affect you emotionally? So I don't mean to ask you to cry or to jump up and down, but as you hear the Bible, read the Bible, listen to a sermon, does it make you, again, respond in some way? Because if you're just cold and you think it's an intellectual puzzle, oh, that's interesting. 1 + 1 = 2. Wow, I never realized that. Trinity, what does that mean? And then you just look at the Bible, you actually, I really doubt that's the Christian life. The scholar, the biblical professor who knows the Bible in and out but has no emotional response, I really doubt that he is actually a born-again Christian. Knowing who God is affects you. Okay. Second question, are you committed to read the Bible wide and deep? So both are important. So just check your heart right now. If reading the Bible affects you or does not affect you, that's one thing. Second question is, knowing these things, are you committed to read or study or memorize the Bible and to do it wide, okay, and also deep? And the third part is realizing that you are grafted in, you are pulled into the main branch to inherit the promises of God. This is a thinking question. How does this affect your evangelism and discipleship? Because this question basically is the one that helps me understand why we need to evangelize and disciple. Because I did not do anything to deserve the promises of God. And if God has brought me in by the grace of Christ, by the blood of Christ only, not by my works, then it's something that I want to share with my family members, my loved ones, and anyone who comes to the church. Doesn't matter their race, doesn't matter their language, doesn't matter rich or poor, smart or dumb, sick or healthy, or whether they are sinners, drug addicts, gangsters, prostitutes, or the rich tycoon. It doesn't matter, because none of those things will bring us closer to God. It's only the blood of Christ that has brought us into the covenant people. And we can sing with Israel to God, our Lord. You are the Lord, you alone. Okay, so let's close this session in prayer, and then we'll continue on to the next part.